Okay, let's unpack this. Today we're diving into a case that has remained unsolved for over a decade now. It's a profound mystery, really, but it also echoes a much larger, frankly heartbreaking crisis facing Indigenous communities. Our main sources for this deep dive are articles from Red Lake Nation News and Investigation Discovery, both titled, interestingly, Questions Remain. In 2009, case of high school senior found dead on Minnesota tribal land.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating here in a tragic way is how the specifics, the details of this one young woman's life, Stacy Hill, and her unsolved death, they sort of illuminate this huge systemic issue.
Right.
So we'll explore not just her personal story, but try to understand why her case, and honestly thousands like it, remain wrapped in these unanswered questions.
Exactly. And what that tells us about the challenges, within the justice system for Indigenous peoples. So our mission today really is threefold. First, we want to honor Stacy's memory, the life she lived.
Yep.
Second, understand the specifics of her case, as much as the sources tell us, even if that means highlighting the lack of answers.
Which is often part of the story itself.
It really is. And third, crucially, shed some light on that broader context, the violence against Indigenous women and the systemic problems that seem to perpetuate it all. So let's start maybe by getting to know Stacy a little.
Good idea.
Stacy Lynette Hill was 17 years old, a Red Lake Nation girl, a high school senior. Just seemed to have everything ahead of her.
Yeah.
She was last seen alive in early September 2009. Think about that time, start of the school year, autumn coming.
Full of possibility.
Exactly. But then her remains were tragically found on October 27th, same year, on the Red Lake Indian Reservation up in northwestern Minnesota.
And it's important to note, for listeners who might not know, that the Red Lake Reservation is sovereign tribal land. It's governed by the Red Lake Band of Chippewa Indians.
Right. And that's not just a detail, is it? It's crucial because it brings in these complex jurisdictional issues we'll need to touch on. Things that often complicate investigations like Stacy's.
Definitely.
Stacy herself, she was born in Minneapolis, but she grew up, went to school right there in Red Lake. And the sources, they paint a picture of someone really vibrant. Described as a good student, popular with teachers, classmates, apparently really excited about graduating soon.
Just a typical teenager in many ways, looking forward.
Yeah, and creative too.
Ah.
The sources mentioned she enjoyed beading, drawing, reading, loved basketball, using the computer, movies. But the detail that really stuck with me, from her obituary, I think, was her love for taking long walks with family and friends.
That paints a picture, doesn't it?
It really does. You can almost see her,
Yeah.
chatting, dreaming about the future, a life just full of potential. And then suddenly, brutally, cut short.
And that's the core of the heartbreak, isn't it? It just radiates outwards. Despite knowing these things about who she was, here we are over 13 years later, and still so few answers about what happened to her.
It's hard to fathom.
Her life was commemorated at a traditional funeral service in July 2010. That's nearly a year after her death.
Wow, a year.
Yeah, and that delay itself, it sort of speaks volumes,
Yeah.
about the community grappling with it, the shock, the grief, the search for understanding, for accountability. It's agonizing.
That immediate lack of answers just becomes this defining thing. And sadly, as you said, that happens in far too many cases involving Indigenous people.
It does.
And that ache for closure, you can feel it still. Years later, and what her loved ones say, the sources show this pain. Like a Facebook memorial post from January 2020 noted it would have been her golden birthday.
Oh, wow. Those milestones are tough.
Yeah, reminders of what she missed. And even further back, 2014, someone posted just now, wish we're here, just wish I knew what happened to us. Completely. And maybe the most powerful quote comes from someone named Kay in the reader comments on one of the articles. This was recent, December 2022. Kay wrote, and you can just feel it, I really wish the police or somebody would have investigated further into when this happened. This is my best friend, and I just want to know what really happened to her.
Oh, that just hits you, doesn't it? My best friend.
It really does. You read things like that and you realize this isn't some dusty cold case file. It's an open wound, still bleeding for so many people in Red Lake Nation.
And that lack of initial breakthroughs, no arrests, the silence that follows, it just leaves this void. Time doesn't seem to fill it.
No. And the suffering is just magnified by the systemic issues we're talking about, the ones that leave families waiting, sometimes forever, for any kind of justice.
Which brings us to that bigger picture.
Mm.
Because Stacy's case, as deeply personal and devastating as it is for her family, her friends, her community, it's tragically not isolated.
Yeah.
Her story, the questions around it, they mirror this much broader systemic problem. The sources are very clear. Native American communities, and Indigenous women especially, face assault, abduction, murder at rates just way higher than the national average.
And when you look at the actual data, these personal tragedies
Yeah.
take on this chilling scale.
Yeah.
The statistics are, well, they're staggering. They really demand you pay attention.
Mm-hmm.
There was a 2016 National Institute of Justice study. It found that 84.3%, that's just, think about that, 84.3% of American Indian and Alaska Native women,
That's 4 in 5 women.
4 in 5, will have experienced violence in their lifetime. That number just, it hangs there.
It's almost unbelievable.
And the study adds, over 56% have been victims of sexual violence.
So more than half.
More than half. And then there's the murder rate. This is
Yeah.
where it gets incredibly sobering. The CDC, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, they state that Native women living on reservations face a murder rate potentially 10 times the U.S. average.
10 times. It's shocking. 10 times. To put it another way, homicide is the third leading cause of death for Native women. These aren't just numbers on a page. They represent lives, families, whole communities affected, generation after generation, by a crisis that often just doesn't get the attention it deserves.
Absolutely. And what these figures really underscore is just the sheer volume of these cases and the really complex issues underneath it all that lead to these stats and the lack of answers.
Right.
The Bureau of Indian Affairs, the BIA, they estimate there are currently well over 4,000 active missing and murdered cases involving Indigenous persons right now across the country.
4,000 active cases.
Yeah, and many of them, like Stacy's, they stay unsolved because of what our sources point to, a critical lack of investigative resources.
So what does that mean exactly? Lack of resources.
Well, it's not just about, say, not enough officers, though that's often true. It's this deeply rooted problem, often boiling down to a patchwork of jurisdictions, tribal, state, federal. They overlap, but they're frequently under-resourced.
A tangled web, you mean? Exactly. Imagine. A crime happens on tribal land. Okay, who investigates? Depending on the laws, like Public Law 280 in some states, it could be the state, the feds, the tribe, or some confusing mix.
So cases can just fall through the cracks.
Precisely. Delayed by bureaucracy, unclear authority, sometimes just neglect. It means there often isn't the capacity to chase down new leads from witnesses or re-examine evidence, even old evidence with new tech, or properly track suspects.
So leads go cold.
Leads go cold, evidence might degrade or get lost, and families are just left waiting, in limbo.
So practically speaking, on the ground,
Mm-hmm.
maybe a tribal police department, they might be really dedicated, but maybe underfunded compared to, say, a state agency.
Very often the case. They might lack specialized training for complex cases, forensic tools, access to those big databases that can connect dots.
Okay.
And if they need federal help, say from the FBI, those resources might not come quickly, or maybe the case doesn't hit the threshold for federal priority right away.
Which means critical time is lost.
Critical time, vital time just slips away before a full investigation even gets going properly. It's a system that, maybe not intentionally, but through neglect and complexity, allows these cases to just stagnate.
And there's a history here, too, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely. You can't ignore the historical context. Generations of Indigenous peoples facing systemic oppression, forced assimilation, broken treaties, a long history of violence, and, frankly, deep distrust with outside law enforcement.
So people might be hesitant to come forward.
Yeah.
Victims, witnesses.
Exactly. They might fear not being believed or facing more marginalization or just feeling like justice won't be served anyway based on past experiences.
That makes sense.
And add to that inconsistent data collection across all these different agencies, it means the real scale of the crisis,
Wow.
It's probably even worse than the horrifying stats we have.
So cases might not even be properly documented.
Right, making it harder to see patterns, allocate resources where they're needed most, and ultimately hold perpetrators accountable. It's this cycle.
This cycle of underfunding, jurisdictional confusion, historical distrust, you can see how it would just crush communities.
It does. It's not just the individual loss, which is immense. It's the erosion of trust in the very systems meant to protect people. It's generational trauma being perpetuated. It's this constant fear that maybe your loved ones are seen as less valuable,
Yeah.
less deserving of justice.
Yeah. The sources make it tragically clear. For far too long, Indigenous women have been almost invisible within the justice system, their stories untold, their calls for help often unheard.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, what does all this mean for you listening? It means understanding that there are places to turn, avenues for support, for information, and that every little bit of information can actually make a huge difference.
That's crucial.
The Bureau of Indian Affairs has a missing and murdered unit. It exists specifically to help with these cases. If you or someone you know have any information about any missing or murdered Indigenous person, the sources give ways to contact them. You can text 847-411 or call 833-560-2065 or email ojsmm@baya.gov.
And those aren't just numbers. They represent lifelines, potential lifelines for families desperate for answers.
Right, critical tools. And just knowing they exist, sharing that information, helps amplify their reach.
And it's vital to get why this unit matters so much. It relies on people coming forward, on community information, to piece together these incredibly complex cases. Knowing why they often go cold, the jurisdiction maze, the resource gaps, that history of distrust, it just highlights how important these dedicated resources are.
Yeah.
And why every single piece of credible information, no matter how small it seems, really needs to be shared. It's about giving some power back to those who've been disempowered for so long.
So today, we've tried to honor Stacy Hill's memory, this bright, creative young woman whose unsolved case is just such a stark, painful reminder of this huge crisis facing Indigenous women across North America. We've looked at the devastating statistics, heard those calls from loved ones still seeking answers, seeking justice, and we started to unpack the complex, systemic failures that let this crisis continue.
And you've heard those numbers. 4 out of 5 Indigenous women experiencing violence. Murder rates possibly 10 times the national average on reservations. Thousands of unsolved cases, often due to resource gaps, jurisdictional chaos, historical distrust.
Yeah.
So when we think about Stacy Hill's case, still largely unanswered after more than 13 years, it leaves us with a really important and unsettling question, doesn't it?
Correct.
What is the real cost, the true cost of these investigative gaps, these systemic blind spots? Not just for the individual families going through unbearable grief, but for the trust, the sovereignty, the very fabric of entire Indigenous communities, and maybe what responsibility do we all have, in demanding the changes needed to finally bring justice and maybe some measure of healing?